Hi friends, welcome to Organic True Crime with Sydney Hopes, also featuring my dog Stella snoring. Sorry about that. Where I talk about interesting true crime stories. This month, I've been discussing poisoning cases, and today's is a doctor from the 1800s who killed several people for financial gain, pretty much, until making one fatal mistake. So today we're talking about William Palmer. So William Palmer was born in 1824, and I couldn't really find a whole lot about like his childhood or early life. We do know that he was born in Rudgley, Staffordshire in the UK. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. Anyway, um, and his family was decently well off. William made a lot of trouble for himself growing up, and especially while he was studying to become a doctor. By the time William was 20, he had already been accused of embezzlement multiple times. He had also been accused of poisoning someone during a drinking competition and also of running an illegal abortion clinic. He didn't really get in any trouble for any of this, just a lot of accusations, and he had to move jobs a couple times. But in 1846, at 22 years old, William Palmer officially became a doctor. It did actually take him a little longer than most people at this time because he kept having to move internships because he kept being accused of stealing either money or medicine. But he did eventually become a doctor, and he ended up moving back home to work at the Stafford Infirmary. In 1847, William married a woman named Anne Brooks. Anne came from a pretty wealthy family, which probably seemed like an advantage to William, who was actually a very heavy and very unsuccessful gambler. And at this point in his life, he began acquiring some pretty hefty gambling bets and started becoming pretty desperate for money. Sorry, my brain just blanked there for a second. In 1848, Anne gave birth to their first child, William Brooks Palmer. And in January of the next year, her mother, Anne Mary Thornton, came to visit. But during her visit, she became very ill and suddenly died. And at this point, Anne, her daughter, inherited quite a bit of money. I'm not sure exactly how much, but it was apparently quite a bit. And then in 1850, another guest of the Palmer family became suddenly ill and died. This time it was a 49-year-old man named Leonard Bladden. I'm sorry. Anyway, he actually came to visit the Palmer family after lending William a large sum of money, which William had lost at some horse races, and he was unable to pay Leonard. But then I guess he didn't have to. Anyway, later that year, Anne gave birth to their second child. Her name was Elizabeth, but unfortunately, 2 months later, Elizabeth died. In 1851, Anne gave birth to their third child, Henry. Henry died about a month later. And then in 1852, Anne gave birth to their fourth child, Frank. And Frank died 7 hours after his birth. And then in 1854, she gave birth to their fifth child, John, who died about 3 days after his birth. And at the time, it wasn't really all that uncommon for infants to die, so I guess nobody really questioned it all that much or looked into it. And then Anne Brooks, at 27 years old, became suddenly ill and died. But also, nobody questioned that because she happened to die during a cholera outbreak. So everyone just kind of thought she died from that. And even when William cashed in on his £13,000 life insurance on his wife, and when he inherited all of his wife's family money, nobody thought to question that either. And shortly after Anne's death, one of their housemaids gave birth to William's child, Alfred. Now, William was actually known for having quite a few illegitimate children, but I couldn't ever find an actual number of it. It's also said that several of his children died in infancy, but I couldn't find an exact number of that either. But William didn't quit gambling at this point, and he also didn't get any better, so he continued to acquire debts. And what was his solution? He insured his brother Walter's life. And then suddenly, in August of 1855, Walter became ill and died. Unfortunately for William, the insurance company said that Walter died too soon after the insurance money or the life insurance was purchased, so they didn't give him any money. And they were really suspicious of this also, that somebody bought life insurance and then all of a sudden this young man just died. And I'm pretty sure they did go to the police with their suspicions, but nothing was really done about it for some reason. So after being denied this insurance money, William becomes pretty desperate because not only does he have several gambling debts he needs to pay, he's also being blackmailed by another woman who has had his child. One weekend in 1855 in November, William Palmer and his friend John Parsons Cook attended some horse races, and they were placing several bets throughout the weekend. And by the end of the weekend, it was discovered that John Cook had done really well and won quite a bit of money, whereas William Palmer had done really bad and lost a lot of money. But the two went out drinking to go celebrate all of John's winnings, and this is when John started feeling really sick, but he just kind of blamed it on the night of drinking, and the two went their separate ways, and they both went home. But once they got home, or once John got home, he kept getting more and more sick. So his good friend William sent him some soup to help make him feel better. But one of the staff actually says that they tasted the soup and then became violently ill, but I guess still served it to him. Anyway, and then another time during his friend's illness, William came to visit. And as he was a doctor, some of the staff said that they saw William giving John pills, but they didn't really question it. You know, he's a doctor, they're friends, whatever. And then it came time for John to go to the horse track and pick up all of his money he had won. But he was too sick to go, so his good friend William went for him. And then 2 days later, John died. Now, he was not very old and not known for being very sick except for this sudden illness. So John's stepfather actually asked for his body to be examined for postpartum examination to be done because he was afraid that something more serious was going on. And somehow, I guess because William is a doctor, he in some way involved himself in the postmortem examination, and he was like stumbling around trying to accidentally spill important evidence. And then he also tried to bribe some of the other staff members that were involved in the examination, but none of that worked. All it did was make him look super suspicious. And then shortly after, someone admitted to selling him, I'm so sorry, I don't know how to say this word. I'm going to put it on the screen, but it's strychnine. Anyway, this was at the time used as a pesticide, but it was really new and nobody really knew a whole lot about it. But very shortly after this discovery, William Palmer was arrested. And they actually had the body of his wife Anne and his brother Walter exhumed so that they could examine them. William's trial had to be moved out of town because he was pretty well known as a doctor, and just from his family, also his wife and her family was pretty well known, and pretty much everyone involved in the story was. So they had to move it somewhere else so that they could have a fair jury. But even with this, William was very quickly found guilty for the murder of John Parsons Cook. They decided that there wasn't enough evidence to charge him for Anne or Walter's murder, although there wasn't actually any physical evidence against him for John's murder either. It was all just circumstantial. But the jury still felt that that was enough, and William Palmer was charged with the murder, was convicted of the murder, and he was sentenced to death. On June 14th, 1856, William Palmer was publicly, very, very publicly, in front of about 30,000 people, hanged for his crime. His last words were to look down at the trapdoor and say, "Are you sure it's safe?" And that is William Palmer. And I'm really curious what you think about, because there were a lot of people around him that died, but there wasn't any proof. There was never any proof against him for any of them. It just seemed really obvious that he had killed these people. I mean, he was the only one that benefited from it. He was also the common denominator of several people just suddenly getting sick and dying. But again, that wasn't really that uncommon at the time for people to get sick and die from things. So, do you think he killed all of his children and his illegitimate children and some people he owed money to? Or did they just happen to die when they were around him? Was he just a bad doctor? I don't know. What do you think? Let me know, and I'll see you next time. Bye.